tell the story. I was actually made deputy mayor the night that the Thomas fire started. We were having my ceremony right when the fire was starting, and our mayor at the time got really ill, and I kind of got put into acting mayor the same night. And I remember thinking at that time that this must be a once in a lifetime experience for someone in elected office to kind of be in that position when facing, the worst natural disaster your city's ever faced. And here we are 2 years later in a new position, but now dealing with the worst pandemic that we've ever faced in 100 years. And so it's a challenging time. And I know just from talking with so many people over the past year that this pandemic really has impacted all of us in unique and challenging ways, professionally, personally, public health wise. It's these lockdown orders and school closures. It's just been an incredibly difficult year. And I wouldn't just say this, but I truly believe that that light out at the end of the tunnels is right around the corner. At the least, it's getting brighter every day. I really think that we're going to see some sense of normalcy in the next month or two. Obviously, the big news being the governor's announcement recently that June 15th is when a lot of these orders are going to be removed. That's a huge date, 2 months away. But to me, a lot of it really starts with the vaccines. Probably 90% of what my staff and I have been working on over the past few months has been COVID related and largely vaccines. And the big news that yesterday was that we officially reached where over 50% of the eligible population in Ventura County has now received one dose of vaccine. Over 550 given total, and even 33% are now fully vaccinated. And so we're above state and national averages there. And I think that's very reflected in our COVID numbers, which have been trending down for months now. And at the point right now where we're in the yellow tier in one category, almost in the yellow tier in the other two categories. And if these trends continue, I think that we'll be able to reach the yellow tier by the end of the month. And that just means more businesses open, more events, greater capacity. It's what I think we're all trying to get to, is that sense of normalcy. And it's looking like the later part of April, the first part of May, we'll be able to reach that yellow tier. And then after that, it's just a month until the June 15th date that we're all looking forward to. Obviously the news with the Johnson & Johnson pause, that's going to cause us a hiccup here in the county. We had two large clinics planned this week and next that were going to be with J&J vaccines. That pushes the past. Apologize if you've been trying to get an appointment, you haven't been able to. We've been promised a lot more than we've received when it comes to vaccine shipments. This Johnson & Johnson pause is only aggravating that. But what we were told in a call yesterday was that by the end of April, we should be receiving a mass increase in vaccine shipments to the county. We think by the first part of May, we're going to be able to open up more appointments than we'll even be able to fill. And at that point, it's going to be just really an education campaign to the public about the importance of getting vaccinated. Right now, with over 50% of the county 16 and over receiving at least one dose, that's great, because we're pushing towards that 70% number. That 70 to 80% range is where you get the herd immunity. And that's so important from a public health perspective. And we're really close to that. I think we could probably reach that by the first part of May. And that's going to give both myself and I hope a lot of you just the public health confidence that it's safe to really go back to normal life. We're getting there. My daughter just started. I have a 7-year-old daughter at Loma Vista Elementary School. She was just able to go back to full time this week. Things are really starting to pick up, and I know it's a great feeling for me. I hope a lot of you are feeling confidence as well. With COVID, it's the one thing that I've really been trying to focus on in the little time that we have is the RV situation on the North Ventura Avenue. Probably many of you have seen that. My staff's been working really hard to rectify that situation and come up with a long-term solution there. And then beyond that, the other thing I'm really trying to focus on is housing. I know that impacts a lot of your work. We're really trying to focus on solutions to increase the housing stock in the county. I get that a lot of homes built are in city limits, And so it's working with city councils and those elected officials and city staff on their housing needs. But also the county has unappropriated land that we're really trying to focus on bringing some unique developments to. I tell people the one thing that keeps me up at night about Ventura County is this kind of what I kind of see as a housing crisis and an affordability crisis, that it's just getting harder and harder for people to be able to afford to live here. And that's as someone who was born and raised here, I'm a second generation. My daughters are third generation. It pains me when I see friends and colleagues who have to leave the area just because they simply can't afford to live here anymore. And I think a lot of that affordability crisis goes back to housing. So as COVID kind of slowly becomes less and less of what I do every day, it's housing, which I really want to focus on across the whole spectrum. I think farm worker housing is incredibly important, given the importance of farm workers to our local ag community. I've had many discussions already with the farm worker community, the farmer community, about ways we can partner and work on that issue. We just did our housing element where we're talking about several really interesting projects that we're building in the unincorporated parts of the county, where we're going to be bringing hopefully close to 1,000 new units into the county, some rental, some to own. But that's, to me, moving forward, it's housing and it's the local economy. Building up the local economy, which has really been lagging over the last few years. And so those are really my priorities. I would love to answer any questions that you have.
Well, I have a city question that's in the chat room. So, but I'm sure
I'll try my best.
I'm sure that one of the most popular questions is, will downtown Ventura stay the way it is? Can you hear me?
I sure hope so.
Yeah.
That's something that we worked on back when I was on city council. We were, it's interesting when you get elected to city council, the board of supervisors, they basically put you through a 2-day training, and then they tell you go have fun. And so there's really not a lot of intensive training that you get when you kind of come into this position. And you learn a lot going through the ropes. And when COVID hit and we realized that we had to be flexible and to pivot and to come up with creative ideas on how we were going to adjust to these new economic restrictions. My colleagues and I came up with this closing Main Street idea, which I think has just been immensely successful. I have heard probably 99% positive reaction to that. I think it's been great for our downtown. The walkability, it's been really great for the businesses from what I'm hearing. And I know it was extended through the end of the year. And I truly hope that the city council makes it permanent. There's obviously going to have to be some infrastructure work that takes place if you want to make it permanent, dealing with curb cuts and maybe some sidewalk extensions and to really make it work long term. And so there's some cost associated with that. But in my conversations with the current council, I think it's something that everybody agrees should be permanent. And I've told them I'll do whatever I can in my position to help make that so, because it's just, I think, been such a great resource in addition to our downtown. And it's really helped a lot of these restaurants and businesses stay afloat during this challenging year.
Cool. One of the questions I actually had as well, when I remember you gave a State of the City a couple of years ago, and you talked about water projects connecting to, the name is escaping me right now, because
State water?
Yeah, to state water. And
state water, right?
Yeah, one of the questions is the Board of Supervisors involved in that, in the water planning for the city of Ventura, or even just local towns in general?
Not per se. I think the county is kind of on the sides as a resource for when cities need us. But I was obviously very intimately involved with the city water needs. And when you talk about housing, water is part and parcel of that discussion. And I think I really applaud what the city's doing now to try to work on this long-term stable water supply. 2 projects in the works, which are really innovative. One being the connection to the state water system, that intertie. It's something we've been paying for 40 years. And because we had never had these drought situations for the past 40 years, the city never actually built the infrastructure to connect to the system to bring the water in. It's an allotment we were paying for, and we never had the infrastructure to bring it in. But seeing now that these drought conditions might kind of be a thing of what we need to get used to. It looks like it. If we look back the last 5 years and moving forward, I think we're on the 3rd driest season in the history of the recordable history. And so the connection to state water is going to be a huge boost. And we're partnered. I know the city's partnering with the Casitas Water District on that as well. The Casitas department has an allotment. We're going to be able to get to build piping and pumping to where we're going to be able to bring it into the city limits, also pump it up into the Casitas limits, and to be able to help restock the lake a little. So that's going to be great for the Ojai Valley as well. And the other big project, which I'm sure many of you heard about, is this Ventura Water Pure, which is the recycle project. And that's going to be able to kind of help us create a continual, stable water supply, because any water used is going to be recycled and put back into the system. That's the state water. That's a project which hopefully should be done in the next 3 years, I believe. State water is about a 5 to 7 year. I'm sorry, the Ventura Water Pure is about a 5 to 7 year project. But if you want to start looking out towards 2030, I think the city has two plans in place, which are really going to address the water stabilization issue. And that's going to help us build the housing we need. We're way behind on the units we need for our constituents, our population. And I think having this water is going to really help the housing crisis.
For sure. So one of the questions in the chat room is about ADUs. And is the county working on making that easier and cheaper to add to existing properties?
We are. That's a great question. I think ADUs are a key part of solving the housing crisis. The state has come in, a lot of cities, I use the word NIMBY. I don't mean it pejoratively, but there's some, certain people who don't believe in ADUs. They're worried about density. They're worried about parking. They're worried about just more people in neighborhoods. But ADUs are a simple way to address this need of housing. And the state has come in and put a lot of rules in place at the state level, which limit cities discouraging ADUs. And so I know as part of our housing element, which we are in the process of adopting, the ADU is a really important focus of that housing element. And I know at the city level, it's the same thing. You want to keep some control, but you also want to encourage people to do it because it's a cheap, effective way to bring more units into our housing stock. And so at the county, that was one of our priorities in our housing element is streamlining that and really encouraging people to build ADUs. And I know the city is going to have that as part of their housing element as well.
One of the questions, speaking of housing, is that there seems to be a lot of planning for condos and apartments, but what about prioritizing single family homes? Maybe on the side of the 33 or on the east side of Ventura?
You need both. People ask me about housing, and I say we need housing from the truly affordable end of the spectrum to the executive end of the spectrum. I mean, there's a real scary lack of supply across the whole spectrum, and I think that it would be wrong for a city or a county to focus on only one of those. We have to focus on the whole spectrum. And so, yes, there's a lot of apartments and condos for sale, but we also need to start focusing on the single home stock as well. I know the county, the projects we've approved recently are the dense, the multi-unit, but we're always looking for areas where we can build cool single-family projects. I know there's several that are in construction right now in Ventura on the east end, which are single-family. There's a big one that's about, I believe, to start phase 3 of construction, which is going to add significantly more housing stock for sale. And so, yeah, I think to answer that question is we need to focus on all of it.
One of the other questions is, how about the Channel Islands Harbor area? I think we've got a lot of abandoned properties and buildings. What are the county's thoughts on rejuvenating that?
The county, I'm on the visioning committee for the harbor. It's not in my district, but it's, I do have history with the Ventura Harbor and redeveloping that into an active and engaged community. And I think the Oxnard Harbor is so underperforming right now. And we have a new harbor director in there. And the first thing he said to me is, Matt, this is so underperforming. There could be so much more here. And I think housing has to be part of that. If we want to see a thoroughly engaged and performing harbor, there needs to be amenities, but there also needs to be housing. The project that was proposed there was a multi-unit apartment building. The neighbors were not happy with it. And I don't really disagree. It maybe didn't fit the harbor, but we've gone back to the drawing table. And there's some new things that are being proposed in this visioning process that are going to bring much needed units to the harbor with increased amenities. And I think it's going to be a mix. It's not going to be single family. as what I'm seeing in the visioning process is multi-unit, but I think there's going to be a mix of for rent and for sale, which I think is great.
Okay, interesting. Hey, Joe, I see you probably can't text, right? You want to go ahead and unmute?
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question for Matt, please. So Matt, you referenced normalcy, hopefully middle of June. And I'm curious, does normal look like wearing masks, or masks going to be kind of obsolete, you think? Thank you.
That's a great question. And to be honest, I don't know for sure. My understanding from what I'm hearing out of Sacramento is that they're not going to be obsolete, but it's going to be limited. I mean, what they're telling people now is that if you're fully vaccinated, there's less need to wear a mask, especially when you're in groups of other people who are vaccinated. And so I think it's still going to be in our lives after June 15th. That's the understanding I have coming out of Sacramento. But I would assume that on June 15th, the statewide mask ordinance would go away. We'll see. I don't know what the governor's going to do. He's kind of famous for giving us, 1 hour notice of these rules he puts in place. But so to answer your question, I don't think they'll be obsolete, but I think it will be scaled back. Well,
because I almost feel normal now is to wear a mask. So I'm just kind of curious how that might look here down the road. So thank you very much.
It's I still wear masks when I'm in public, when I'm in groups. It's just, to me, it's a simple thing to do, just to add, even if it's a little extra level of security. I do it. I don't like it. I don't think anybody likes wearing masks, but when you're looking at the public health, I think that there's positive elements to it. So as more and more people get vaccinated, it will become less and less as important. But for the time being, we still have over 50% of the population that's not vaccinated. And we still have 27 people in the hospital, 5 people in ICU. I mean, the threat's still out there. It's definitely scaled back. It's definitely so much improved from that surge we saw in December and January, and that's so positive that we're making this progress. But it's not gone, and I think we have to keep that in mind for the foreseeable future.
Thank you. Thanks, Jana.
One of the questions in the chat room is, where and when will we see the new unincorporated housing units being located and being approved? So I guess we don't really have obviously we're all about housing in this group here, so we don't have a concept of where this unincorporated area is that you're referencing.
Yeah, the two projects that are probably the closest, we just approved a large 360 unit farm worker housing project in between Camarillo and Somas on Lewis Road.
Great.
That should be, I think they're going to be going in for permits, soon. We just approved it in January. Another large development that we hope is close is at this Rio Urbana. It's the old El Rio School District site off Vineyard in the unincorporated Oxnard. That's about I think a 250 unit project that we hope to we're still working on a tax sharing agreement between the county and the city, which goes back to the harbor dispute, which I referenced earlier. But we're making good progress there, and that's a project which I hope would come on board this year. And then we also didn't approve, but there's several proposed projects in the Santa Clara Valley, Heritage Valley, which we're looking at outside of Santa Paula and outside of Fillmore. So those are the ones that I know are kind of in the works, at least in their infancy. But to me, I'm working, if there's any unincorporated part of the county, I'd love to focus on projects which serve the needs of those communities.
Cool. I don't know if you would be plugged into this, but I believe there's a proposed development going on in Midtown Ventura right now along Channel Drive, and a lot of people in the neighborhood are opposing it, I would assume due to traffic concerns. Do you have any details on that or info on that?
Peripherally, I've heard some of the neighbor concerns. Obviously, it's going to be a city project, so I won't be part of the approval process. But I believe it's like a 70 unit townhome development. I think for sale. I think that's a for sale project. It's an old industrial yard right now, and I saw a conceptual drawing last year. It looked like a nice project. I don't know where it is in the approval process, but I know that they're trying to get it to fruition, to bring 70 for sale townhomes into that neighborhood.
Let's see, we have other questions. Let's see. Oh, this is just about being fully vaccinated and staying masked or not. Let's see what other, sorry, I'm reading to see what else I missed in the chat room. Let's see. Oh, any discussion of vaccine passport requirements? Is that something that would come up in our county?
No, it wouldn't be a county order. I see it on the news as something that's being considered. Personally, I don't see that happening, an actual vaccine passport at a federal level. I could be wrong. I think they're really going to try to encourage people to get vaccinated. I don't know if they're ever going to mandate it and make it like a passport requirement. But it'd be tough to say, because that would probably come out of at the federal level.
Sure.
And it's tough to say at this point what the administration would do.
Yeah. Yeah, gosh, I mean, personally speaking, when I wanted to go to Brazil, there was a vaccination requirement for yellow fever. So, I mean, it's not like it's unprecedented to have to get vaccinated to go to a country, but I guess that'll be interesting to see what happens. Mike, you want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question?
Goes along with what Joey had to say, but possibly, I don't know. I was thinking, like, as more and more people start to come downtown and, you know, people are getting more comfortable with possibly taking off their masks, to have maybe some like Visit Ventura or Downtown Ventura lanyards that's like a little plastic kind of thing like this, you know, where you could stick your vaccine card in there, you know. So I mean, I don't know if everybody would want to do something like that, but then it kind of, you know, you're not, oh, that person isn't wearing a mask, like, and you see this little lanyard that they got on, oh yeah, that person has their vaccine. Just thoughts. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I kind of that end kind of cut off. I'm sorry.
He was just wondering, is there a precedent or a reason to make it more public, whether you have a vaccine or not, so that people feel more comfortable or not if you're wearing a mask or not?
Yeah.
Or not.
It's a good question, because, you know, getting a vaccine is a personal decision, and I respect that. I don't know. It's a really interesting question moving forward. How people are going to confirm whether or not they're vaccinated, if that card you get is going to be something you keep in your wallet to show. It's a great question. I just, at this point, I just don't know.
And then how involved is the county as far as like homelessness and dealing with, you know, the fires and the riverbeds and stuff like that?
Yeah, we're really involved in the homelessness, and, you know, I appreciate what my predecessor, Supervisor Bennett, did in terms of starting a program where we said that if any city in the county wants to address homelessness in their community, the county is willing to be a 50-50 partner in that. And we took full advantage of that when I was mayor. When we built that homeless shelter, which I think has been a big success. Unfortunately, it opened right before COVID, so we haven't been able to have it at full capacity. But we had it up to full capacity before COVID, and the same offer stands for any city, and that's something that I'm continuing to champion now that I've taken over Steve's seat. Is that we really want to work with cities on homelessness. It's not just unique to Ventura or my district. It's a countywide situation, and I think with COVID, it's only going to exacerbate the economic impact. Any of which I haven't seen yet.
Sorry.
And we really got to focus on homelessness, on people living in their RVs, many of whom that's all they have right now. And so it's working on being able to make sure that people have safe places to sleep and identifying a permanent location. I don't think that permanent location is on North Ventura Avenue. And that's why the program that we're doing right now is a 1-year program. We've already been able to reduce the RVs by 50%. And we've put 15 people into permanent housing through this program. But that's going to sunset in December. And so we have to identify a long-term location, probably a regional, a countywide location where people across the county can have a safe place to sleep, and while they kind of work on a long-term solution and a housing plan. But homelessness is going to be something that I know is going to be one of my top priorities and the most serious issues over the next 4 years.
So is there a possibility of having some sort of an RV park that folks can hook up to without paying
Yeah.
really high rent?
That's what I'm working on with county staff right now, is identifying that location. I think what we did in the city when I was on that council was we had a safe sleep program at a local church where people in their cars had a safe place to go sleep away from neighborhoods. And, but the key is identifying that location where they're safe and secure, but also making sure that services are part of that. It's more than just providing a safe spot to sleep with these individuals on whatever their unique challenges. Everybody's homeless for a different reason. A lot of it's mental health, a lot of it's drug and alcohol related. Some people it's a health reason, an injury. Some people are just down on their luck and lost a job. And so you really want to focus on providing services as part of this safe sleep program, we'll call it. And right now we're trying to identify where that location is and how and with this RV program, this pilot program we're doing.
You're cutting out a little bit, Matt. Hey, one of the
permit to park up there for this year, you're able to engage in services, and that's how we're able to house these 15 individuals.
One of the questions is
sorry,
what about like empty? Yeah, you're cutting out quite a bit. One of the questions is about empty commercial buildings and industrial areas. And does the county have anything to say or do with the empty theater on Johnson in Ventura?
Unfortunately not. That's in the city. I know it's something there. The Johnson Drive corridor is one of their priority development areas. I know is trying to figure out ways to better engage that part of town. But you mentioned the industrial buildings, and I think what made the homeless shelter in Ventura so effective is the location, that it didn't have any neighbor impacts, any residential impacts, and it was the right zone to put a shelter. And I think when we're looking at RVs and safe sleep programs, we have to identify a similar zone where you're not going to have the neighbor and the kind of the local community impacts, but at the same time, you're providing these much needed services. And so that's something that, my staff and I are really focused on, is identifying this location. And there has to be an industrial zone somewhere where it's really going to work.
Sure, that makes sense. Michael, you have a question. Your hand is still up. You want to unmute?
Sure. Yeah, I just wanted to say, I've had a lot of conversations, and I don't, protest to say I'm a disease expert, but there's a misnomer that people that get fully vaccinated can no longer transmit the disease. And it's incorrect. I had posted that directly and quoted the Center for Disease Control that people that are fully vaccinated can still transfer it.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. It's by no means does that getting vaccinated mean you can't transfer it. I think it severely limits the ease of transmitting it to other people, but by no means is it not possible. And I think that's why we still have to be careful in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just pure logic. I mean, many of us get the flu vaccine every year, and you still get the flu, and you can still pass the flu. So theoretically, you get it as badly. So yeah, that doesn't make sense that folks would think that, oh, you can't ever pass it again.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is because we were talking about lightening up on masks. The CDC still says it can be transmitted, so we might not be lightening up on masks. That's the only reason I brought it up.
Yeah, true. Good point. Good point. There was a question about anti-graffiti program and hotline that went away during COVID. Is that going to come back? Do you know?
The county graffiti line is still active. I know the city had one when I was on city council. I hadn't heard it went away. If it did, it shouldn't have. Graffiti is still a big issue. It might have slowed the ability to come out and do cleanups. I know before COVID, we had a policy of between 24 and 48 hours of when we got a call into the hotline, we'd go out and clean it up. And they were pretty good about meeting that timeline. And the county keeps the same timeline. I just heard about a large graffiti thing up in a catch basin kind of near Miners Oaks. And I know the county was out there within a day cleaning it up. I think it was had some racial tones to it, which we wanted to get rid of immediately. And so the county still has an active graffiti plan. If you need that number, email me and I'll give it to you. And it's my understanding that the city still has theirs too. I got more and more calls recently about some kind of a graffiti increase on the East End, I think near Johnson Drive, and something that I forwarded to the city manager, and he said it would be taken care of. And so I think it's still active.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Lisa, you want to unmute? I see you have a question.
Hi, Matt. I actually was going to just kind of come forward as a realtor member of the association here in regards to the homelessness problem we have. I think it would be a wonderful thing for us as realtors to be somewhat more involved in the project, maybe finding ways to raise funds to help, because we are, as realtors, it's our due diligence to basically help, our community. And I think the homeless problem is so hard on everyone. And if we can be a part of this in any way, I don't know, maybe I'm just extending this for all of us. As the association, please let us know. It would be wonderful to be able to help.
I appreciate that. And you kind of hit it on the head. This is going to take a community-wide approach, and it needs community-wide engagement. It's such a big problem, and it's so complex, and it's going to take a lot of smart people from government to the faith-based community, to the nonprofit community, everybody working together to identify projects and partnerships to address it. And thankfully, the state has given us some money through Project Home Key to start buying up old motels to use as permanent housing. We just did one in Oxnard, and I think we got funding for a second one. So I think the county Continuum of Care is trying to identify a second location where we're able to get people off the streets and into permanent housing, and they call it transitional housing. When they're in that housing, once they're actually housed, that's when services become most effective, and you're really able to reach people. And so the more we can get people under a roof, I think services are going to become more and more effective, and that's how long-term solutions happen.
Very cool. Yeah, that sounds really great. Tim, why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Thanks, Jenna. I'm reading the chat box also, and there's a couple questions about this, and I have a question. The downtown corridor, Thompson Boulevard and stuff, there's a lot of building going on down there. And then also, what's happening with those properties on the bluff? I understand there's some mold issues and some stuff, and then there's a corner of San Juan and Thompson, they're building out there, and there's a lot of building going on down there. So commercial, residential, and then what's going on with the bluff?
Yeah, I know there's the project on the corner of San Juan and Thompson is a townhome project that was approved, I think, several years ago. And as you can see, they're starting construction there. There's also that project right across from Cafe Nouveau, which I know is making progress. The one on the bluff, at the old chart house site, is that the one you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah. I thought they had opened phase one of that. I hadn't heard about any mold issues. You could be right. I'm kind of out of the loop on that now. But I know they were almost done with all three phases out there, and we're starting to populate it.
Yeah, I thought they were moving people in there. I'm not sure about that. And they are rentals, Tim. I don't know if you're aware.
The ones on the bluff are rentals, yes.
Okay, cool. One of the questions, actually, somebody who has a business in the industrial area, talking about housing homeless folks in the industrial area. He just has concerns of protecting the businesses and the people that work in that area as well.
It's that's a fair point. And I think when you look at industrial, you also want to try to avoid areas where there's a lot of walk-up industrial, where customers are coming in and out. And I think, if you look at the Ventura location, it's really back deep hidden. It's next to the Gold Coast recycling facility and next to the FedEx warehouse, where there's really no public coming in and out. In my talking with Gold Coast, the Harrison family, and the people at FedEx, they have had no issues having the shelter located there because it's so well run and so well managed. And the company or the entity that's running that Mercy House, neighbor relations are a huge part of their plan in making sure that there are no impacts. We went and toured a Mercy facility in Orange County before we picked them as the operator at the city level. And they were in an industrial zone in Anaheim. We went around and talked to the neighbors, and they said, half of them said they didn't even know there was a homeless shelter there, because that's how well managed it was. And I think it's picking the right operator, and it's picking the right location where you have the least impact possible to both businesses and their customers.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. We don't want to keep you forever. We really appreciate your taking your valuable time. I have a personal question for you. What drew you to wanting to be the mayor and then further your career in being a supervisor?
I'll give you the, that could be a 3-hour response. I'll give you the executive summary. What it really came down to for me was, being born and raised in Ventura in Ojai. I was born in Ventura. I moved to Ojai when I was 9 or 10, finished my schooling up there. But I ended up going to Pepperdine for college. Got good grades. I had a good resume. I had kind of everything going for me. And at that time, it should have been in 2000. I came back to Ventura after college and couldn't find a job. I looked for a long time and I couldn't find a job. There was really limited housing for someone in my stage of life at that time. And that it caused me to go back east and ended up going to law school. And so when I came back to Ventura in 2006, I started my career. I wasn't really focused on these types of issues. As you know, when you're building your career, it's a very selfish time. It's a lot about you and starting your life. And I got married and was building my career. And then I had my first daughter in 2013. And that, as those of you who have kids, you kind of recognize how it really recalibrates your worldview. You become a lot less selfish at that time. And you start thinking about the bigger picture. And I looked around in 2013, 2014, and I realized at that time that really not much had changed locally in terms of opportunities for young people. And I looked at the city council, and there was no person on the city council at that time who that was their main focus. What are we doing for the next generation to make sure that there's these opportunities, the opportunities that I didn't have when I graduated from college. And so that's what kind of drew me to politics, was trying to bring that viewpoint, that 20-year viewpoint to the council. And so that's what drew me in, is just trying to really focus on those issues. What are we doing on jobs, on housing, on building a community that in 20 years, my kid or your grandkid is going to have possibilities here. So that's what kind of drew me in. And obviously the Thomas Fire, COVID has kind of changed some of the priorities, that you can't predict the future. But long term, that's still my absolute number one focus is what are we doing with the local economy? What are we doing with housing? To start thinking about Ventura County, 2040.
Very cool. There. Okay, I thought it cut out. We have one more question in the gallery. Ben, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you very much for coming here. And one suggestion, is there any discussion or thought process of rezoning commercial to residential with the virtual working?
Yeah, very good question. And something that we've been thinking a lot about. Right now in Ventura, a property that's zoned commercial actually allows you to build a largely residential project. We did that with one of the projects on the East End. I believe it was the Citrus Walk project. I believe it was zoned commercial, but they built a project that was a mixed use, and there was maybe a 10% commercial element to it with a 90% residential. So there is possibilities there in properties zoned commercial. But you're right. I think that's one of those things. This working from home, this new kind of virtual reality we're in now, where people don't have to go into offices. And the feeling I get from talking with businesses is a lot of them are going to move to more of a hybrid system. And I think office space is going to become less and less in demand. And we're going to have to start thinking about some of these buildings and can we transition those into housing? I think we need to. There's a lot of both dilapidated properties and properties which are right now not going to have the same density in terms of commercial use moving forward. And I think that's something we absolutely have to focus on, is what can we do to redevelop those types of properties to meet these housing needs we have.
Very good. Sounds really good. Awesome. Well, I think you have answered so many questions. We really appreciate it. And it is music to our very tired ears from this real estate market to hear about plans for more housing in our county. That's certainly the really severe crunch we're all dealing with right now. So we definitely appreciate that focus.
It's definitely at the top of my priority list. Absolutely.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Matt. We appreciate you generously giving us your valuable time and giving us some good ideas of what's going on out there. So if you guys want to unmute yourselves and say thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. It's great seeing a lot of familiar faces.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone.
I know I didn't want to scare.
Yeah, we appreciate your time. Have a great week.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.